Hello, friends! On Monday, October 7, 1985, the Italian cruise ship Achille Lauro docked at Egypt's Alexandria port. This was the fifth day of its journey that had begun in Genoa, Italy. On board were 748 passengers and 450 crew members. At Alexandria, 651 passengers disembarked and boarded buses for a day trip to visit the pyramids. The ship, with the remaining 97 passengers, then departed the port and headed 225 kilometers west to Port Said, where the tour group was expected to rejoin the vessel 14 hours later. Up to this point, everything was going according to plan, but things soon took a dark turn. That night, around 10:30 p.m., the tourists returned to Port Said expecting to reboard the Achille Lauro, but the ship was nowhere to be found. Initially, they were told that traffic at the Suez Canal had delayed the ship, but after waiting for 3 hours with no sign of it, the truth came out. The Achille Lauro had been hijacked. Among the remaining 97 passengers were 4 hijackers posing as tourists. It is believed they had smuggled their weapons on board by hiding them in fuel tanks. After leaving Alexandria, they used a hairdryer in their cabin to dry the weapons, which caused a strong smell. A waiter accidentally entered their room while delivering fruit and spotted them. Possibly, the hijackers hadn't planned to act so soon, but once exposed, they quickly took action. They stormed the dining hall, terrified the passengers, and began taking hostages. At first, nobody knew who these men were or what they wanted. When a hostess asked one of them where he was from, he falsely claimed to be Norwegian. Before they could reach the radio room, the ship's operator had already sent an SOS signal, which was picked up by a Swedish radio station. Unaware that their cover had already been blown, the hijackers then seized the radio room and shut down all ship communications. Through the loudspeakers, they ordered the captain to the bridge. When Captain Gerardo arrived, he was greeted with gunfire. The hijackers, speaking broken English, ordered him to sail 500 kilometers toward the Syrian port of Tar. It was then that Captain Gerardo realized these men were not Norwegians. They instructed him to keep the crew working normally, but away from the hostages. With guns pointed at him, the captain had no choice but to comply. As the ship changed course, no one among the crew or hostages knew what was going to happen next. That evening, the hijackers forced all the passengers to sleep on the floor. Meanwhile, the SOS message had already spread around the world, and the Italian crisis management team was activated. At first, Italy didn't treat the situation as a serious threat, but when they learned that American nationals were also on board, the United States got involved and declared it a terrorist attack. The U.S. had a strict policy of not negotiating with terrorists. However, the crisis had already become international. The ship was Italian. The incident occurred in Egyptian waters, and American passengers were among the hostages. The debate now was who should take action. While the U.S. wanted a firm response, Italy preferred negotiation to avoid damaging its relations with Mediterranean countries. The U.S., however, warned all coastal nations not to allow the Achille Lauro to dock. On the morning of October 8th, the ship approached Syria. The captain requested permission to dock, but Syria, already warned by the U.S., refused to respond. At this point, the hijackers began segregating the passengers by nationality. It was clear they were looking for Americans and Jews. They separated 20 passengers, including an elderly couple, Leon Klinghoffer and her 69-year-old husband, Leon, who was in a wheelchair. The hijackers ordered Leon to be taken to the upper deck, but due to his condition, he couldn't go. His wife protested, but she was silenced at gunpoint. Angry and defiant, Leon verbally lashed out at the hijackers. When Syria still refused entry, the hijackers used the radio to make their demands public. They identified themselves as members of the Palestinian Liberation Front and demanded that Israel release 50 Palestinian prisoners. If their demands weren't met by 3 p.m., they threatened to begin executing Jewish passengers one by one. This threat escalated tensions even further, drawing Syria, Israel, and Palestine into the crisis. But the deadline passed without any negotiations or action. The hijackers then claimed they had killed an American passenger and threatened to kill more. Despite the claim, there was still no official confirmation. Italy contacted PLO chairman Yasser Arafat to ask whether the PLF was behind the hijacking. Arafat denied involvement but still sent a negotiation team to Egypt to help resolve the situation. Among the negotiators was Abu Abbas, the PLF's own leader. He contacted the hijackers through a Cyprus radio station and convinced them to dock back at Port Said in Egypt. On arrival, he apologized to the captain and held private talks with the hijackers. Italy and Egypt were eager to end the standoff without violence, especially since it was now entangled in the broader Israel-Palestine conflict. The U.S., however, still wanted the hijackers arrested and prosecuted, refusing to accept any negotiations. Nevertheless, a deal was made. The hijackers would be given safe passage off the ship. The next day, Captain Gerardo made a public announcement assuring everyone that all passengers and crew were safe. The hijackers were secretly taken inland by Egyptian authorities. But behind the scenes, it was revealed that during the crisis, the hijackers had in fact murdered Leon Klinghoffer and thrown his body overboard. This shocking development caused a global uproar. With the hijackers now free in Egypt, the U.S. demanded their arrests, but Egypt denied knowledge of their whereabouts, even though intelligence reports revealed they were being flown to Tunisia under Egyptian protection. On October 10th, hijackers boarded a civilian aircraft to Tunisia. The U.S. had other plans. As the plane flew over the Mediterranean, U.S. Navy F-14 fighter jets intercepted it and forced it to land at the NATO airbase in Seganella, Sicily. The Italian government was unaware of the interception until the last moment. Since the plane had landed on Italian soil, Italy claimed jurisdiction, especially as the ship and murder victim were also Italian. A tense standoff began between 80 U.S. soldiers and 300 Italian troops at the airport. Eventually, a call from Washington ordered the U.S. forces to stand down, and a deal was struck. Italy would prosecute the hijackers. The Italian military then boarded the aircraft and arrested the 4 hijackers along with someone unexpected, Abu Abbas, who was found on board. His presence suggested he may have orchestrated the hijacking. However, due to a lack of direct evidence, Abu Abbas was released, while the 4 hijackers were put on trial. The main hijacker who killed Leon Klinghoffer was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and the others received sentences of 15 to 25 years. It was later discovered that hijacking the ship was never the primary plan. They had intended to use it as a base to attack Israel in retaliation for a recent military strike. Leon Klinghoffer's body was eventually found 5 days later on the coast of Syria and was sent home after identification. We hope this detailed account of the Achille Lauro hijacking gave you a deeper understanding of one of the most dramatic hostage situations in modern history. Thank you for your continued support. See you in the next video.